I used to think silence was the price of peace. In our house, the one who spoke least lasted longest. My mother believed composure was a kind of currency, and I learned early to save it. While Chloe filled every room with her laughter and perfect timing, I made myself smaller, easier to overlook, harder to blame. I'm 33 now, a curator at a small but respected modern art museum in New York. People there call me decisive, meticulous, even brilliant. It's strange to be described that way when the voice in your head still whispers, second best. The wedding invitation arrived on a gray Tuesday, slipped through the mail slot like an afterthought. Cream cardstock, gold script. Chloe Lane and Evan Roth request the honor. My hands trembled, though the paper was heavy enough to steady them. Inside was a printed schedule of events: bridal tea, rehearsal dinner, brunch at the club. Each one a gentle reminder that I wasn't part of any of it. Only at the very bottom, in smaller type, reception. Table 19, M. Lane plus guest. I laughed, quietly, because crying would have required someone to hear it. For years I told myself we were simply different kinds of daughters. Chloe was the headline. I was the footnote. When I curated my first exhibition at 28, Mom said, "That's lovely, dear. Maybe Chloe can bring her friends." I framed that comment in my mind the way I frame art: distance, lighting, silence. At work that night, I stayed late after closing. The museum has its own heartbeat when empty. The hush of temperature vents, the faint click of motion sensors, the echo of my heels on marble. I wandered past the mirrored installation I love most, thin silver sheets suspended from wires, turning with each movement. They catch fragments of light but never the whole reflection. Families, I've learned, work the same way. You keep turning, trying to find the angle where you finally appear. Outside, sleep peppered the glass facade. My phone buzzed with a message from Chloe. "Got your invite. Hope you can make it." I stared at the heart emoji until it blurred. She'd sent it like a stranger confirming a delivery. I poured myself a glass of wine when I got home and sat on the couch, invitation beside me like an unwanted guest. The RSVP card was blank, waiting. I thought about the education fund I once had, a promise from Dad when I started graduate school, that somehow turned into Chloe's temporary investment. They'd called it a family decision, as though I'd voted yes. I told myself it was just money, but every time I paid rent late or skipped a meal, the number followed me like a ghost. $12,000, the price of being the reasonable daughter. I opened my old photo album, the one I rarely touched. In one picture, Chloe and I stood on the porch in matching dresses. She's grinning, I'm half turned away, squinting against the sun. Dad had captioned the back, "Chloe's first recital." I was there too, but only as background. That has been the rhythm of my life, present, yet cropped. I should have declined. It would have been easy to stay here, in the life I built from other people's cast-off confidence. But something in me, small and tired, wanted to see it through, to stand quietly in the middle of the spectacle and see if they'd notice the person they'd written out. So I filled the card, accepts with pleasure. The lie tasted familiar. Before sealing the envelope, I paused. Beneath the printed nameline, I added my own in pen. Maya Lane, and then smaller, still here. I slipped it into the mailbox downstairs and felt the faintest pulse of defiance. Maybe silence had served its time. Maybe it was my turn to make some noise, even if only a whisper loud enough to hear myself again. The morning after mailing the RSVP, I woke to an inbox crowded with work messages. The museum's spring exhibition, Echoes of the Ordinary, was closing that week, and the board wanted final attendance numbers, press clippings, and a summary report. Deadlines are merciful. They don't care if your heart feels like a loose hinge. By 9, I was in the main gallery, clipboard in hand, adjusting the angle of a spotlight that refused to cooperate. The exhibit had been my quiet triumph. 15 contemporary pieces about absence, blank canvases etched faintly with text, sculptures missing their central elements, photographs of unoccupied chairs. Critics called it a study in invisible presence. I never told them it came from personal expertise. Adrian Cole arrived mid-morning, his wool coat trailing raindrops onto the polished floor. He was one of the museum's board members, an architect in his early 40s, calm in that way people are when they've built too much to prove anything. "You're early," I said, not looking up from the light. "I like seeing things before the crowd does," he replied, stepping beside me. "Your show's ending too soon." "It's had its run." "Good things should linger," he said. And then, after a beat, "You okay?" I hesitated. Wedding invite arrived. "Ah, the one you didn't want." "The one I wasn't really invited to," I said. "Technically, I'm allowed to sit at table 19, which I think is museum code for storage area." Adrian smiled, not unkindly. "Then consider yourself in rare company. Most great works spend years in storage before anyone appreciates them." He had a knack for saying things that sounded simple but landed deep. When he left, he touched the edge of one of the mirror pieces. "You know," he said, "it reflects differently depending on who's looking. That's its secret." Then he was gone, leaving me to the hum of the lights. By noon, the gallery filled with visitors. Couples took selfies beside the installations. Teenagers whispered theories into their phones. I drifted among them, answering questions. A woman in pearls asked, "Is this meant to be sad or hopeful?" I told her, "Both. Sometimes the absence is the proof something mattered." When the crowd thinned, I slipped into the museum cafe. The barista, who'd seen me through every deadline, slid a coffee across the counter. "Rough day?" "Just family things." "The ones you can't curate?" "Exactly." I found a corner seat and opened my notebook. I'd started sketching out notes for my next exhibition, Inheritance. The theme had come to me the night before, after rereading the trust documents I still kept in a drawer. It would be a collection about what families pass down that can't be displayed. Guilt, expectation, silence. My phone vibrated. A message from Mom. "We're thrilled you can make it, sweetheart. Bring something elegant but not too modern. The guests are conservative." I read it 3 times. Not too modern. As if my existence needed to match the decor. I typed a reply, deleted it, typed again, then stopped. I'd spent half my life rehearsing answers that earned me small approvals. Instead, I let her message sit unread and turned the phone face down. At 4, I met with the museum director to close the exhibition accounts. "You'll take a few weeks off, I hope," she said. "Recharge before the next season." "Something like that," I said. Recharge sounded generous. What I needed was recalibration. Before heading home, I wandered through the museum gift shop. Rows of postcards and art books gleamed under track lighting. Visitors always pass through here last. "Exit through the gift shop," they called it. A final chance to take something home that proved they'd been moved. I stood by the shelf of exhibition catalogs bearing my name and thought about proof. How families wanted it. How they never recognized it when it didn't come wrapped in gold script. Outside, the rain had stopped. The glass doors reflected my outline in the dusk. For the first time in years, I didn't look transparent. I looked like someone about to do something she wouldn't regret. I caught my reflection's eye and whispered, "We'll attend. We'll stay quiet, but not silent." Then I walked out through the gift shop, past my own face on the back of a catalog, into the wet New York evening where everything smelled like clean slate. I left before sunrise to beat the traffic that hardens around the city like old glue. The streets were still rinsed from last night's rain, reflecting stoplights in long red and green ladders. I packed light, a navy dress that could pass for elegant but not too modern, a pair of low heels, the museum catalog from Machaut, and the folder of trust documents I kept telling myself I wouldn't need. I slid the folder in last and closed the zipper before I could change my mind. The car smelled faintly of coffee and rain as I merged onto the FDR. The river, a sheet of pewter, kept pace on my right. Somewhere behind me my phone chimed, but I let it go to voicemail. I wanted the first hour to belong to tire noise and breathing. Nothing else. By the time I reached the George Washington Bridge, the sky was pale as paper. I pressed play on the voicemail. Dad's voice arrived warm but distant, like a radio between stations. "Hi, kiddo. Your mother says you're coming. That's good. Look, this weekend, let's just keep things simple. No need to dig into old accounting. It's Chloe's time. We want everyone to have a nice, uncomplicated celebration. Drive safe. Old accounting. He'd chosen the right word by accident. Numbers with feelings attached. I pictured his desk at home, drawers that stuck, folders that slid forward when you pulled the handle too hard. Simplicity, in our family, had always meant silence shaped to look like kindness. New Jersey flattened out around me, billboards leaning into the wind. I set the cruise control and let the highway carry me. Mile markers turned into a metronome for thinking. I remembered the first time I drove this route alone, 22, a borrowed sedan, leaving home for grad school with a trunk full of books and a heart full of instructions I didn't ask for. Mom had hugged me and whispered, "Don't forget where you come from." I hadn't, though sometimes I wished I could misplace the map. I stopped at a service plaza for gas and something sweet. The cashier handed me a paper cup of coffee and a cinnamon roll collapsing under its own icing. A family in matching sweatshirts took turns photographing each other by a vending machine. The mother smoothed the daughter's hair, then stepped aside to frame the shot. I watched the girl lean into the picture, unafraid to take up the center. It shouldn't have hurt to see how easy it looked. Back on the road, I rehearsed small talk in my head. The museum is good. Yes, New York is expensive. No, I'm not seeing anyone serious. Yes, Chloe looks beautiful in the photos. It felt like arranging a wall label so strangers could nod and move along. What would I say if someone asked what I wanted? The question sat heavy, sticky. I wanted to be ordinary to my parents in the way that Chloe was, assumed, included, expected, no RSVP required. The city limits signs began to change. The vowels rounded into the familiar shapes of Pennsylvania. I cracked the window for the sharp, green smell that always surprised me this close to a city. Wet leaves, cut grass, something metallic like rain on iron. My phone vibrated again, this time a text from Adrian. "You've got this. Remember, observe the composition." I smiled in spite of myself. I typed back, "Under review." Then, after a moment, "Thanks." I could almost hear his thoughtful pause in the dots that followed, but no reply came. Good. Not everything needed an audience. Traffic thickened near the outskirts, brake lights winking like supper-time windows. I exited onto the boulevard that would take me toward the suburbs. Familiar landmarks slid past. The old brick factory turned lofts, the diner with the eternal "open" sign. My chest tightened the way it does when you step back into a place that trained your lungs to breathe shallow. At a red light, I took out the RSVP card stub I'd tucked into the glove compartment. The perforated edge was rough under my thumb. Beneath my name, the tiny words I'd added, "Still here," looked brave from a distance and small up close. Maybe both could be true. I folded the card and put it back. As the houses grew bigger and farther apart, I spoke my plan aloud to the empty car, testing the shape of it. Be pleasant, be present, record the details, ask for nothing. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Pleasant to remove excuses. Present so they couldn't say I imagined it. Recording because truth gets slippery in our family, and I needed the ground to hold. The turn from my parents' neighborhood came too soon. Stone walls, manicured hedges, a lake pretending to be natural. I drove past the guardhouse that now required a code I never remembered because it was rarely given to me. The gate lifted anyway. They were expecting the wedding traffic. At the top of the hill, our house appeared. A long, low span of pale brick and windows that hid more than they revealed. I pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. The ticking of cooling metal was louder than I liked. In the silence that followed, I could hear my heartbeat. It wasn't frantic, it was there. Mine. I checked my face in the rearview mirror. Not brave, not broken, just a woman who had decided to witness her own life. I gathered the navy dress, the catalog, and, after a second of indecision, the folder with the trust documents. I wouldn't wave it around, but I wouldn't leave it behind. Before I reached for the door handle, I played Dad's voicemail one more time, letting the words wash over me in their practiced gentleness. Keep things simple. I pressed delete. Then I stepped out of the car and into the air of the place that raised me to disappear, ready to see if I could remain visible long enough to say hello. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother stood framed in the light, her perfume already spilling into the night air, powder and something sharper underneath. "Maya, finally!" She kissed the air near my cheek and took my suitcase before I could protest. "We've been frantic here. Sit, you must be tired." The house looked the same. Pale brick, the smell of lemon polish, photographs aligned like equations. Even the silence sounded rehearsed. Chloe's voice floated from upstairs, bright, commanding. "Mom, does Maya have the extra hangers?" I didn't, of course. I never had what she needed, only what could be borrowed later. Dad appeared from the hallway, tie loosened, expression careful. "Hey, kiddo." A pat on the shoulder, quick and weightless. "Long drive?" "Not bad," I said. The understatement tasted like metal. He gestured toward the kitchen. "Coffee's fresh. We've been sorting last-minute details. You'll appreciate the logistics. They're running it like a small corporation." I bet. On the dining table lay a stack of glossy programs, a seating chart printed in swirling script, and a glittering array of place cards. My mother moved like a conductor, aligning them by hand. "Don't smudge the ink, please." She handed me one. My name, Ms. Maya Lane, nestled among strangers. An old family friend, a distant cousin, and a +1 from Evan's side. Table 19, again. "Isn't it lovely?" she asked. "You'll meet so many new people. Were none of my people available?" The question slipped out before I could code it in politeness. She blinked. "Everyone else has assigned duties. You'll enjoy yourself more this way." Chloe swept into the room, phone in one hand, hanger in the other. "Maya, you made it!" Her hug smelled of salon products and urgency. "You'll love the venue tomorrow. We did a soft rehearsal tonight. Don't worry. I told the photographer to grab you at the brunch instead. Lighting's better." "Perfect," I said. "Wouldn't want to overexpose." She missed the edge, too busy tapping her phone. "Oh, and thanks again for connecting us with Adrian Cole. Evan says he might invest in the architecture fund. You're a lifesaver." I froze. "Adrian?" "Yes. The architect? You mentioned he's on your museum board. Mom thought he'd be perfect for our post-wedding brunch panel on community arts giving." Chloe's smile was effortless. "I sent him the invite this morning." I looked at Mom. "You invited one of my colleagues to a fundraiser using my name." She adjusted a stack of programs. "You're always saying you want people to appreciate art. Consider it exposure." The word landed like a slap. In museums, exposure meant light damage, slow fading until nothing remained. I excused myself and went upstairs to the guest room that had once been mine. The wallpaper was new, but the faint outline of my teenage posters lingered like ghosts behind the fresh paint. On the desk sat a small silver frame. Chloe at graduation, Chloe with Dad, Chloe and Mom on vacation. My photos were in storage somewhere. I'd packed them years ago and never unpacked them again. I sat on the bed and breathed through the ache. I had promised myself to stay pleasant, to observe. Observation, however, demanded evidence. I pulled out my phone and took a quick photo of the seating chart, then another of the programs. The flash washed the ink in a brief, sterile glare. Proof. Downstairs, laughter erupted. Through the vent, I could hear them discussing the ceremony playlist. Chloe wanted a jazz trio. Dad preferred strings. Their voices overlapped like overlapping exhibits, each louder than necessary. My absence made no difference to the conversation. I opened my folder and scanned the trust papers again, tracing the signature line that wasn't mine. The number still sat there. 12,000, transferred, family approval implied. I wondered if they'd ever considered how small they'd made me to fit into that lie. Outside, the lake shimmered under porch lights. From this window, the reflection looked almost real, smooth, perfect, designed to hide its depth. I pressed my forehead to the glass until the cool steadied me. Tomorrow would be the rehearsal, and then the ceremony. 2 more days of politeness. I could do that. I'd learned from experts. Before turning off the lamp, I opened my notebook and wrote a single line. Table 19. Observe the composition. Then beneath it, smaller, no exposure without consent. Sleep didn't last. At 2 a.m., the house was hushed except for the refrigerator's soft hum and the rhythmic tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. The kind of quiet that feels padded, like it's hiding something. I slipped from the guest bed, the floor cool under my bare feet, and followed the glow under the study door. Dad's office still smelled of ink and coffee. Every drawer had a label in his block handwriting. Taxes, property, trust docs. Neat enough to look innocent. I hadn't come here to snoop, I told myself, just to remember how it felt to exist in a room where decisions about me were made without me. Then my eyes caught a folder half pulled from the bottom drawer, a corner of paper sticking out with my own name typed neatly in the header. I sat in his chair and opened it. The first page was a summary sheet for the Lane Family Education Trust. My breath slowed as I scanned the lines. Beneficiaries: Chloe Lane, primary; Maya Lane, secondary. Below that, a transfer notation from 9 years ago. $12,000 to C. Lane investment account. Temporary loan pending return upon liquidity. The column marked status read, resolved, no further action. My signature was there, but it wasn't mine. The loop of the M was perfect, the way my mother wrote it when she signed my report cards. I traced the ink until my fingers tingled. Behind me, the floor creaked. Dad stood in the doorway in his robe, eyes half closed. Maya, what are you doing? I turned the folder so he could see. Reviewing old accounting. He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. You shouldn't dig through private files. Private? It's my name. It was a family loan. We agreed it was best for everyone at the time. I didn't agree. He shifted, shoulders tightening. Your mother thought you'd understand. Chloe needed seed money for her business, and look how she turned out. That's supposed to make it right? Maya, please. He lowered his voice, that calm manager tone he used in arguments. This weekend is not the moment to relitigate ancient history. Let's focus on celebration. After the honeymoon, we'll look into formalizing some repayment. The word formalizing made me laugh. Quiet, shaky. You mean pretending again, like signing my name for me? He looked away, to the bookshelf, to anything else. Your mother handled that. She said you were too busy in New York to fax a form. Busy. I remembered that week. I was packing for a conference and answering voicemails about rent. She'd called, said she needed a copy of my signature for the museum insurance paperwork. She'd been so casual I didn't think. Now here was the result, neatly filed under resolved. Dad closed the folder and slid it back into the drawer. I'll speak to her, but please, don't make a scene tomorrow. Everyone's under enough stress. I won't. My voice was steady. I was past the stage of scenes. I was in the stage of records. When he'd gone, I took out my phone and photographed every page. The shutter click was sharp in the silence. Each image was proof, not just of money, but of a habit of rewriting me into agreement. Back upstairs, the house breathed its slow, rich sleep. Through the window, I could see the lake catching the moonlight, smooth as polished stone. I wondered how many reflections it had swallowed over the years without a ripple. I sat on the bed and opened my notebook. Under yesterday's entry, Table 19, observe the composition. I added new lines. The clock downstairs chimed 3. I returned the folder to its drawer the next morning before anyone woke. Breakfast was already set when I came down. Chloe in a robe of satin and authority, Mom arranging berries into a perfect circle. No one mentioned the open drawer. Over coffee, Mom said, "Sweetheart, I hope you slept well. We have a busy day. The venue needs programs and place cards by noon. You don't mind delivering them, do you?" Chloe's styling session ran late. I smiled. Of course. See? Always so helpful. She patted my hand. Her fingers were warm. Mine were steady. Under the table, my phone vibrated once. A text from Adrian. Everything still on schedule? I typed back. Research ongoing. The rehearsal dinner glowed like a magazine spread, strings of amber bulbs, white tents reflecting champagne laughter. Every table shimmered with glassware and silver. I arrived 20 minutes early, thinking I could disappear before the crowd formed. Instead, I walked into the center of it. "Table 19, right?" the planner asked with cheerful precision. She pointed toward the edge of the courtyard, past the manicured hedges, and the floral arch where everyone would later pose. The table was half in shadow, angled away from the main seating area. A literal metaphor. Mother would have approved. I set down my clutch and scanned the setup. Each place card bore someone else's small history. Mr. and Mrs. Tom Carver. Dr. Jane Peterson, guest of groom. Then there was mine, printed slightly crooked. Ms. Maya Lane. The band rehearsed a jazz number near the bar. Staff moved like clockwork, their rhythm soothing. I almost convinced myself this could be just another event to curate, a composition of color and movement. But then Mom appeared in a lavender dress and the illusion cracked. "There you are," she said. "We had the photographer do a quick family preview, but you can join at the brunch tomorrow. Less chaos." "Wouldn't want to clutter the shot," I said. She missed it, too busy waving to a guest across the courtyard. "Remember to compliment Evan's parents on the wine choice. They're very proud of it." "I'll make a note." By 6, guests poured in. Laughter filled the tent. Glasses clinked, the sound of belonging swelling until it covered everything else. I kept my expression polite, the mask I'd worn for years fitting effortlessly. Adrian arrived halfway through dinner, unexpected and calm in a charcoal suit. He caught my eye from across the courtyard, gave a small nod that said, "I'm here, but not here for them." It steadied me more than the wine. During the speeches, Chloe sparkled, literally in sequined gold. She toasted Evan, her voice clear, practiced. "To love, to family, to the people who shaped us." Her gaze drifted toward our parents, then away. I waited for her to glance at me, even briefly, but she didn't. After applause, the chatter swelled again. A woman at my table leaned over. "You're Chloe's sister, right? The curator? She mentioned you in her toast." "Did she?" She said something about inheriting her sense of taste. So charming. I smiled thinly. That's one word for it. The woman laughed, not hearing the crack beneath it. Adrian slipped into the seat beside me, balancing a drink. "Observation complete?" "Still collecting data." He tilted his glass toward the crowd. "Control group seems unaware of experiment." Perfect conditions. For a moment we watched the dance floor, Chloe radiant under the lights, Evan spinning her in practiced circles. Dad clapped in rhythm, Mom dabbed her eyes. Everything looked beautifully, painfully choreographed. "Do they know you curated this?" Adrian asked softly. "What do you mean?" "You're still the center of the frame," he said. "They just don't realize it yet." The thought startled me. I wasn't sure if it was comfort or warning. Later, I went to the bar for water. The bartender handed it over with a sympathetic smile. "Family event?" "Too obvious?" "You've got the look. Half hostage, half anthropologist." I laughed, genuinely this time. "Accurate." Across the room, Mom and Dad posed for a photo with Chloe and Evan. The flash bleached them into perfection. I turned away before I could measure how much space I took up in that image. Probably none. By the time dessert arrived, the air had cooled. Candles flickered low, conversation thinning to softer notes. I excused myself and walked along the path behind the tent where fairy lights tangled in the hedges. The night smelled of roses and stress. My phone buzzed. A message from Dad. "Remember, no surprises tomorrow." I stared at it, thumb hovering. Then another buzz. Adrian again. "Want to grab a minute before you leave?" I typed, "By the lake." He met me there. Tie loosened, jacket over one arm. "You handled yourself," he said. "I've had practice." He studied my face. "You don't have to carry the whole history alone, you know." "I'm not carrying it," I said. "I'm cataloging it." He nodded, understanding more than he should. The lake mirrored the tent lights in rippling gold. My reflection floated between them, half in shadow, half illuminated. "I'm leaving early tomorrow," Adrian said quietly. "But I'll be around if you need a witness." That word, witness, felt heavier than it should have. As he walked back toward the tent, I whispered to the water, Table 19. Control, witness, truth. The lake kept my secrets, as it always had. When I returned, Chloe was waving me over for a final group shot. Maya, get in the frame. I hesitated, then stepped forward. The flash went off just as I blinked. In the photo, I'd later see it clearly. Chloe centered, parents radiant, Evan smiling, and me at the edge, half lit but still visible. Morning arrived as a thin gray ribbon at the edge of the curtains. I dressed in the robe left on my door. Ivory terry, hotel soft. A note pinned to the collar in my mother's handwriting. Salon at 9. Don't be late. The command sounded like an invitation until you checked for a name. There wasn't one. The bridal suite occupied 2 conjoined rooms at the hotel. White orchids, trays of cut fruit, a soundtrack of cheerful instrumentals that kept resetting to the same chorus. I paused in the doorway, invisible until a stylist noticed me and ushered me to a chair with professional kindness. Name? She asked, already clipping a cape around my shoulders. Maya. She glanced at a printed schedule taped to the mirror. Bride, MOH, bridesmaids 4, mother of bride, mother of groom. My name was nowhere. She hesitated, then leaned closer, her voice soft. I was told you preferred privacy. We were to leave you off the list and do a quick touch-up if you stopped by. Heat rose to my face. Who told you that? She swallowed. The coordinator said it came from the family. She squeezed my shoulder. You look great as you are. I can give you a light gloss, 5 minutes. 5 minutes is fine, I said. Privacy. Such a gentle word for erasure. Across the room, Chloe sat in a high-backed chair, wrapped in a silk robe the color of champagne. Laughter clustered around her, a circle of friends with matching pajamas and the practiced intimacy of a long group chat. Our mother stood near the window, supervising, her voice pitched for serenity. When she saw me in the mirror, she offered a smile that didn't quite land. There you are. We'll catch you at brunch for photos. Lighting is heavenly then. A photographer, thin and efficient, moved through the room capturing candids. Chloe with each bridesmaid. Chloe with mom. Chloe's shoes. Chloe's bouquet. I watched the lens slide past me like a polite elevator door. The printed shot list on his clipboard flashed when he turned. Bride plus only daughter with parents. I blinked and read it again, knowing how easily fonts can lie. He shifted and the page flipped. Maybe I'd misread. Maybe I hadn't. I texted myself a note. Shot list, ask later. Then I lifted my phone and snapped a photo of the mirror's edge, where a sliver of the list showed. Insurance against memory's gaslight. The stylist returned with a little tray. Tilt your chin, she said gently, brushing color onto my mouth, smoothing a stray curl with her palm. There, she whispered. You're luminous. It nearly undid me, being tended to without agenda. I thanked her, tipped too much, and stood. The room had rearranged while I was seated. The bridesmaids lined up by height for a robe photo. Maya, would you mind? The photographer asked, handing me his backup camera without waiting for my answer. I took the picture because someone needed to hold the machine. Chloe crossed the room in a cloud of perfume. You don't mind skipping the getting ready shots, right? We want to keep the album cohesive. Plus, you always say you like to be behind the scenes. She took my hand and squeezed it as if we were sharing a secret rather than redistributing visibility. Of course, I said, voice even. Cohesion is important. Down the hall, I found the corridor quieter. A sign pointed toward ceremony coordination. I followed it to a smaller room where boxes of programs sat open, stacks of cream paper topped with gold ribbon. A clipboard lay nearby. Family photo schedule. I lifted the sheet. Parents plus couple, parents plus bride, parents plus groom, siblings of groom, cousins, friends. My category didn't exist. My phone buzzed. A group text I was accidentally added to or deliberately left in. Bride Squad 25. Remember, no extra photos before ceremony. Keep circle tight. A second message followed from Chloe's friend, confirming, Maya prefers minimal camera time per C. I took screenshots, then archived the thread before it vanished beneath more hearts. Back in the suite, Mom was arranging tiny pearls along Chloe's hairline. There, she murmured, pride wrapped in softness. A classic. Chloe met my eyes in the mirror and smiled. Can you run the programs to the chapel? The planner needs them by 11. Of course, I said, already lifting the box. In the elevator, I let the programs rest against my hip and stared at our reflections in the gold paneling. Me, a courier for the image of a family that never quite included me. The numbers ticked down. At the lobby level, a couple stepped in. Guests by the look of their pressed joy. The woman glanced at the box and said, "You must be so proud. Only daughter, what a day." I met her gaze and smiled pleasantly, practicing for later. It is a beautiful day. Outside, the air smelled like rain held back by ceremony. I carried the programs to the chapel and set them on a table where a volunteer would hand them out like proof someone belonged. For a moment, I stood in the doorway and rehearsed, silently, the 4 lines I had promised myself. Be pleasant. Be present. Record the details. Ask for nothing. On the walk back, I opened my notes and added a 5th. Don't apologize for seeing clearly. The lobby pianist had shifted to a new song when I returned. It sounded like something that repeats until you forget it's a loop. I slipped into the elevator and watched the floor numbers rise, each one a small, steady count against vanishing. I pressed my palm to the box to feel its weight and told the mirrored doors the truth out loud, so I wouldn't be tempted to rewrite it later. I did not ask for privacy. They assigned it to me. The doors opened on the bridal floor. The photographer's flash popped once, twice, like a metronome. I walked toward the light, carrying their programs like a citizen of a nation that kept misprinting my name, and set the box where they wanted it. Then I stepped aside, out of the frame, and wrote the moment down. The chapel rehearsal began with the kind of efficiency that only money could choreograph. Every pew was dressed in white ribbon, every candle polished to the same height. Chloe glided down the aisle in a floral maxi dress, bouquet substitute in hand, as the coordinator called out instructions like a metronome. I sat 3 rows back, a temporary observer pretending to be an insider. "Family to the front for the run-through," the coordinator sang. Chairs scraped, silk rustled. Mom motioned vaguely in my direction but didn't look to see if I followed. When I stood, a groomsman slid neatly into the space between us, and I found myself 1 step outside the line again. The officiant cleared his throat. "Let's start from the top. Processional music, please." The organ swelled, solemn and sweet. I watched Chloe's posture. Perfect. Shoulders back, chin lifted. Memorizing how confidence occupies space. At the back of the chapel, Dad whispered something to Mom that made her smile. They looked peaceful, almost holy, the way families do when history hasn't yet spoken. After the second run-through, the planner clapped. "Beautiful! Now let's reset for the recessional." Chloe turned to the bridesmaids. "Remember to pause halfway for photos." She caught my eye and grinned. "Maya, can you time the steps? You've got that curator precision." "Sure." I pulled out my phone and opened the stopwatch. The irony wasn't lost on me, my precision used for someone else's symmetry. As they practiced, I counted quietly. 1, 2, 3, pause. The rhythm steadied my breathing. When the music stopped, Chloe looked radiant and satisfied. "Perfect," she said, voice bright enough to fill the rafters. The photographer wanted a test shot with family, just to check lighting. I stepped forward automatically. The coordinator frowned politely. "Actually, this one's parents and couple only." I nodded and retreated before she finished the sentence. Behind the lens, my parents tilted toward Chloe and Evan, 4 smiles glowing in the camera flash. My absence felt deliberate and therefore organized. Adrian texted halfway through. "How's the field work?" I typed back. "Controlled environment. Subjects unaware of observation." His reply came seconds later. "Keep notes. Truth hides in repetition." During a break, Dad approached. "You're doing great, kiddo. Tomorrow, just relax and enjoy the show." "The show," I repeated. "That what this is?" He chuckled. "Figure of speech. You know your sister. Always production value." I wanted to ask if he remembered promising me a grant for my own exhibition once, the one that never materialized because Chloe's startup needed bridge capital. Instead, I smiled. She's consistent. When we returned to the pews, Mom pressed a program into my hand. Can you double-check the printing? Make sure there are no typos before we finalize tonight. I scanned the pages automatically. Everything gleamed until I reached the back cover. The Lane family thanks you for sharing this moment with us. Love, Margaret, Thomas, Chloe, and Evan. 4 names. 4. I looked again, certain there had been a design oversight. Mom, they left mine off. She sighed, already gathering her purse. Sweetheart, it's a standard template. No siblings listed. Don't take it personally. But Evan's brothers are on the next page. They're ushers. It's different. Of course, I said, folding the program so the crease ran straight through the missing space where I should have been. Outside, dusk pressed against the stained glass, turning everything rose and gold. The others filtered out toward the rehearsal dinner, voices overlapping in easy harmony. I lingered near the front pew until the music faded. My reflection glimmered faintly in the polished piano lid, half light, half shadow, like a double exposure. The image reminded me of my exhibition notes, absence as composition. Before leaving, I slipped one program into my bag, evidence number 14. Then I took a seat at the piano and pressed one key, soft enough that it barely registered. A single tone filled the air, pure and unaccompanied. For that brief moment, it belonged to me entirely. Mom's voice carried from the doorway. Maya, we're heading to dinner. Coming? I'll meet you there, I said. I just need to finish something. She nodded, distracted, and disappeared down the hall. I opened my notebook across the polished wood and wrote, Rehearsal, roles confirmed, lighting, perfect, visibility, optional. Tomorrow's display, curated absence, live installation. The ink bled slightly on the paper, spreading like a shadow trying to keep its shape. I waited until it dried, closed the notebook, and whispered to the empty aisle, Consider this my rehearsal, too. The morning of the wedding felt like waking inside a painting. Soft light, slow air, everything varnished to keep it still. The hotel smelled of lilies and hairspray. From my window, I could see the courtyard transformed. White chairs in disciplined rows, strings of orchids looping across the altar. Every surface looked curated for perfection, which meant it no longer felt real. I dressed early. The navy gown hung a little loose at the shoulders, the same one I'd worn for the museum's gala last spring. I liked the irony. Recycled attire for a recycled role. When I stepped into the hallway, the bustle had already begun. Bridesmaids in champagne silk carried garment bags, mothers clutched purses like shields, and the coordinator whispered into a headset as though orchestrating peace negotiations. At the chapel doors, I found my name missing from the ushers list. He hesitated, checking twice. You're not with the bridal party? No, I said, just family. He smiled apologetically, handed me a spare program, and motioned toward the left aisle. You can sit wherever you like, ma'am. Wherever I liked. A freedom measured in exile. Inside, the music was low and reverent. I chose an empty seat near the back, half in shadow. From here, I could see everything. The audience in rows of anticipation, the altar gleaming like a stage. I could also see Dad adjusting his cufflinks near the front, Mom whispering last-minute details to the officiant, and Chloe, radiant, framed by light as if the world had tilted toward her on cue. The ceremony began precisely at noon. The doors opened, and Chloe entered on Dad's arm. Gasps rose from the crowd. She looked impossibly calm, the embodiment of every compliment she'd ever been given. The string quartet played canon in D, predictable, perfect. I traced the pattern of the melody on my palm, the notes climbing, then falling, like a graph of expectations. When the officiant invited the families to stand for the vows, I remained seated. No one noticed. They were all watching the brightness at the front. I thought of all the times I'd been told to be proud of my sister, how praise for her was supposed to substitute for belonging. Maybe pride had an echo. Maybe I'd been living inside it for years. Chloe's vows were flawless, memorized, eloquent, sprinkled with humor. Evan's voice shook once, then steadied. When he promised to cherish not only your laughter but your silences, something in me flinched. Silences are dangerous in the wrong hands. Applause burst when the rings slipped into place. Cameras flashed, the air filled with that strange mixture of joy and performance that weddings create, a moment so rehearsed it pretends to be spontaneous. I took a discreet photo on my phone, not of Chloe, but of the light fracturing through the stained glass onto the floor. The pattern resembled the mirror installation from my museum, shards of color on marble. Even here, absence had form. As the newlyweds walked back down the aisle, guests leaned toward the center, arms outstretched with phones. I stayed still. When they passed my row, Chloe's veil brushed my arm. She didn't turn, but I caught a faint perfume of orchids and champagne. A passing fragrance. Proof I'd existed in proximity. The recessional music soared. People began to talk again, loud and cheerful, the collective exhale of relief. I waited until the chapel emptied before standing. On the altar, someone had left a stray petal near the microphone. I picked it up and tucked it between the pages of my program. Evidence number 15. Outside, the sun was too bright. Guests posed by the fountain, laughter ricocheting off stone. Mom called across the courtyard, "Maya, join the family photos in 10." Her tone sounded generous, but I knew the framing would decide otherwise. I nodded and drifted toward the edge of the crowd. Adrian appeared from behind a pillar, camera hanging from his shoulder. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Define okay." He tilted his head. "Still recording?" "Always." He looked at the chapel behind me. "It's beautiful," he said. "Depends which side of the lens you're on." The photographer called for family members to gather. Mom waved me forward, then turned away to fix Chloe's train. I stepped closer, into frame, my feet half on sunlight, half on shadow. The shutter clicked 3 times. Later, when the proofs would be printed, I knew what I'd find. A family of 4 glowing at the center, and me on the edge, almost symmetrical. But for that single second, before the flash, I looked straight at the camera and didn't blink. The reception unfolded like a stage production, seamless and overlit. The ballroom at Ridley House glittered with chandeliers and expectation. The air itself seemed rehearsed. Guests moved from cocktail hour to dinner as if guided by an unseen cue. Every corner echoed with laughter that smelled of champagne. My name card waited for me at table 19, tucked near the exit, half hidden behind a floral centerpiece taller than my line of sight. I smoothed the tablecloth and smiled. Anthropologists would kill for a field site this organized. "Mind if I sit?" A man in a dark suit gestured toward the empty chair beside mine. "Apparently I'm overflow from table 8. He introduced himself as Evan's colleague from the firm, then spent the next 5 minutes describing the open bar with evangelical enthusiasm. I nodded at the right intervals, memorizing his cadence instead of his words. His watch glinted. His attention never strayed from the bar's reflection. Dinner began with toasts. Dad opened with practiced warmth. To family, to love, to beginnings. Mom followed, voice trembling at the edges, thanking everyone for sharing in Chloe and Evan's joy. When she said family, I heard the space my name didn't fill. The microphone passed to Chloe. She looked radiant, effortless. "I'm grateful," she said, "for my parents' support and for the friends who stood by me through every plan and panic. And to my sister—" She paused, glancing toward the crowd, locating me by deduction more than memory. "Thank you for making time from your important work to be here. You've always been my quiet inspiration." Applause. I smiled, unsure whether the word quiet was compliment or diagnosis. The band struck up a love song older than all of us. The newlyweds danced first, graceful and luminous. Cameras flashed like approval. I traced the rhythm with my thumb on the napkin's edge. 1, 2, 3, turn. The same timing I'd counted at rehearsal. After a while, the dance floor opened. Guests flooded forward, sequins blurred, shoes clicked. Adrian found me then, materializing from the crowd with a drink in hand. "You survived the toasts," he he said. Barely. He looked toward the dance floor. Want to join? I shook my head. I'm observing. Someone has to archive the data. He leaned closer. You know, at some point, observation becomes participation, whether you mean it to or not. His words settled somewhere between warning and comfort. I looked at him, really looked, the calm certainty, the easy empathy, and thought about how visibility sometimes needs witnesses more than applause. A waiter set dessert in front of me. Lemon torte shaped like perfection. I cut a small piece, the fork trembling slightly. Across the room, Dad was talking to Evan's parents, animated, proud. Mom adjusted Chloe's veil for another photograph. Their joy looked weightless. Mine felt like an anchor I refused to drop. Then came the bouquet toss. The DJ called for all the single ladies, and a chorus of laughter erupted. I stayed seated, but Chloe spotted me. Come on, Maya, don't hide. Reluctantly, I joined the semicircle of women behind her. The bouquet arced through the air in slow motion. For a second, it looked like it might land near me. Then a woman in a coral dress leapt and caught it midair. The crowd cheered. Relief bloomed where embarrassment should have. I returned to my seat unnoticed, which felt like victory. As dinner plates were cleared, Adrian handed me an envelope. You dropped this earlier, he said quietly. Inside was one of the copies of the trust papers I'd photographed, printed neatly, clipped together. You printed them? I whispered. I thought you might want hard proof. Digital files disappear too easily. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The noise around us dulled, replaced by the steady percussion of my own pulse. Thank you, I managed. Just don't burn it tonight, he said, half smiling. I won't, I promised. But I might frame it later. He laughed softly. Now you sound like the curator again. When the final dance began, I slipped the envelope into my clutch. The room glowed gold and soft, everything blurred at the edges, like a photograph developing too fast. I watched Chloe and Evan spin beneath the chandelier, the world orbiting them as expected. Then I looked toward the mirrored wall, caught my own reflection at the edge of the crowd, still, centered in absence, but upright. For once, I didn't flinch from the light. I whispered to my reflection, still here. And the mirror, faithful as always, whispered it back. The music coasted to its last bright note, and the ballroom exhaled. People drifted toward the exits in glittering groups, collecting coats and compliments. I was halfway to the door when my phone began to shake with the kind of vibration that means more than one notification. Then 10. Then 20. A photo filled the screen. Me, alone beside the Lane family sign near the coat check, the letters towering over my head like a caption that didn't match the picture. Someone had snapped it between courses, the moment I'd paused to breathe. The angle made the sign look possessive. The first comment read, "Who's the sister standing by the family sign but not in the photos?" Another, "Invisible siblings at weddings are a genre." Hearts multiplied, shares too. An aunt materialized at my elbow, breath thin with urgency. "Maya, dear, you're online." She turned her phone so I could see Mom's text in the family thread. "Who posted this? Can someone ask them to take it down?" A cousin replied, "Too late, already everywhere." I tucked the phone away and felt something inside me settle, not explode. The image didn't wound, it calibrated. It was proof, the kind you don't have to argue into existence. Back at the house, the silence had the crispness of glass. The porch light cut a bright triangle on the walkway. Inside, Dad stood in the kitchen with his jacket off, sleeves rolled, as if a spill needed containing. Mom paced, clutching her phone like a talisman. Chloe and Evan arrived a few minutes later, the afterglow of celebration still on them, the first edges of worry cutting through. Mom started first. "Maya, we need to be careful. That photo, people will misunderstand. They'll understand exactly," I said. I set my clutch on the counter and placed the envelope Adrian had printed on top. "I'm done asking for softer lighting." Chloe pulled out a stool and sat, the gown whispering against the wood. "This was supposed to be simple," she said, tiredness fraying her voice. "One night about us." "One night never stands alone," I said. "It sits on top of years." Dad cleared his throat, managerial calm at the ready. "Let's all take a breath. We can address the optics in the morning." "This isn't about optics," I said, and opened the envelope. I slid the Lane Family Education Trust pages across the marble, followed by the rehearsal shot list with the line that had almost said only daughter, the program with 4 names, the screenshot of the bridal chat about my preference for privacy. I added my own small ledger, dates, exclusions, the quiet math of being left out. "It's a record." Mom's face pinched. "You're making a mountain out of details. We tried to keep things seamless. That's all anyone wanted." "Seamless for whom?" I asked. "You assigned me privacy and then praised me for preferring it. You borrowed my education fund and listed the debt as resolved. Even tonight, I was a courtesy, not a daughter." Chloe's hands tightened around the edge of the counter. "Maya, stop. For once—" She swallowed, then let the sentence fall out whole. "For once, it was supposed to be about me." There it was, the core, unwrapped. Evan made a small motion as if to intervene, then thought better of it. Dad rubbed his temple. "We did what kept the peace. Appearances matter. Our guests, I repeated, feeling the word tilt. Do they matter more than I do?" No one answered. The old house hummed its low, expensive hum. I turned the trust page so the forged signature faced them. "This is my name. You used it to make the story easier. Look at the pattern, not just the night. Look at how many times I became the missing piece so the picture looked balanced." Mom's eyes flicked to the page and away. "We thought you understood." "I understood perfectly," I said. "I understood that my belonging was contingent on how much space I didn't take." Chloe's shoulders softened, the sequins of her dress going dull under kitchen light. "I didn't mean to erase you," she said, voice small. Every time you're around, people ask about your work, and I—" She stopped, cheeks flushing with a child's honesty. "I didn't want to share this." It wasn't the cruelty I'd braced for. It was something simpler, pettier, truer. Jealousy, domestic-sized, lethal by accumulation. I folded the papers back into a single stack, aligned the corners. When I spoke, my voice surprised me with its steadiness. "Here are my terms. You don't get access to me without respect. That means no more speaking on my behalf, no more edits to my presence for cohesion, no more borrowing and calling it family. If you want reconciliation, it will be on the record and in the light." Dad looked as if the floor had shifted half an inch under his shoes. "Maya, surely we can find a middle ground." "This is the middle ground," I said. "I'm not asking for a speech or a spotlight. I'm asking to exist without asterisks." For a long breath, no one moved. Then Evan nodded once, a small, careful bow toward reality. "I'm sorry," he said. "I was told you preferred distance. I should have asked you, not the story." Chloe's mouth trembled. She didn't finish the word. Not yet. I slid the envelope into my bag. "I'm leaving before brunch," I said. "Please don't make this harder by trying to frame it." At the doorway, Mom called after me, softer than I expected. "Maya, will you send me the photo? The one everyone is posting?" I paused, surprised. "Why?" "So I can look at it," she said. "Really look." I sent it from the porch. The night smelled like wet stone and the first hint of a storm. My phone chimed once with her receipt. No other messages came. I didn't need them. On the walk to the car, I touched the envelope through the fabric of my bag. Paper, ink, a ledger that finally added up. I started the engine, and for the first time all weekend, the sound felt like mine. I checked the time before the sun could. 4:42 a.m., the hour when even houses like ours forget to perform. I dressed in the dark, folded the navy gown into my carry-on, and slid the envelope of documents beside it. The zipper sounded louder than any speech I could have made. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled of last night's lemon polish and cooling silence. I wrote a note on a sticky pad and left it by the coffee maker. Heading back to the city. Congratulations. I paused, then added, M. It looked small, but true. I took one last look at the still life of my family's celebration. Place cards stacked, a ribbon draped over a chair like a shed skin, and stepped into the dawn. Instead of driving straight to the highway, I detoured to the hotel. I didn't owe the brunch an explanation, but I owed myself a clean exit. The lobby was all marble and hush, the night clerk blinking slowly as if waking with the building. "Check out?" he asked. "Change of plans," I said, handing over the keycard I'd barely used. The elevator chimed somewhere far away, a soft bell that felt like permission. On the way out, I passed the ballroom doors, already propped for staff setting up white linens and towers of glass. For once, I didn't imagine myself at the edge of the photographs. I had stepped out of frame on purpose, and the air around me expanded to fit. At the bus station, the fluorescent lights hummed like old refrains. A line of passengers had already formed, night shift nurses, a student with a backpack swallowing his shoulders, a couple whispering logistics. I bought a ticket for the first bus to New York, then sat near the window and watched the sky unspool from slate to pearl. My phone vibrated with a single message from Mom. Received the photo. Then, after a long pause that sagged with untyped words, "Drive safe." I stared at it until the screen dimmed. A second message arrived from an unknown number that resolved, on closer inspection, into the coordinators. Reminder: family brunch 11 a.m. Lane table reserved. I deleted it without replying and felt a quiet click inside me, like a lock finding its home. The bus pulled in with a sigh and swallowed us one by one. I took a seat halfway back and pressed my forehead to the cool window. As we slid onto the highway, the town unstitched. Stone walls, careful lawns, the flash of the lake catching a thin coin of light. I whispered the lines I'd written in my notebook the night before, the ones that had carried me from rehearsal to confrontation. Be pleasant. Be present. Record the details. Ask for nothing. Then I added the fifth rule I'd promised myself yesterday. Don't apologize for seeing clearly. It sounded less like a rule now and more like a spine. Somewhere past the first toll booth, another text arrived. Adrian. Take the bus? Yes, I typed. Needed to leave before the script resumed. 3 dots, then. Board meeting this week. Proposal. Citywide Arts Education Initiative. Museums plus public schools. They want you to lead it. Your terms. I read it twice. Your terms sat there like a chair finally pulled out for me. They know what happened? They know your work. That's enough. I let the message rest where I could see it. Opportunity without permission attached. Oxygen. The man across the aisle snored softly. A child 2 rows up traced her finger along the fogged glass, making rivers and lakes that vanished as soon as the heat caught up. I closed my eyes and let the highway murmur rock me. Sleep came in small, careful pieces. Images unstacking. The forged signature. The bouquet that flew past me. The flash that caught me half in light. When I woke, the bus was threading into the city, steel rising out of morning like a set being struck. Port Authority smelled like coffee and motion. I moved with the crowd to the sidewalk where New York begins again for everyone. Then stood a moment to feel the weight of my own return. The air tasted like wet metal and possibility. At my apartment, the plants had drooped in sympathy but survived. I set the envelope on the kitchen table and the museum catalog beside it, spine aligned with edge. Small order in a day that had been anything but. I made coffee and drank it by the window, the city's noise folding into a workable hum. My phone buzzed, a group text from cousins, another round of links to the viral photo with captions that were less cruel than curious. I didn't respond. The image could carry its own argument. I opened my notebook and documented the night as if it were an exhibit I'd be asked to defend. Evidence 15, chapel light on marble. 16, program with 4 names. 17, photo beside Lane family sign. 18, kitchen conversation, term stated. 19, bus window, face clear in reflection. I wrote until the page filled, then turned it and kept going. Before noon, Adrian texted again. Can I call? 5 minutes. Yes. His voice came steady through the speaker. Maya, they'll want a proposal title. What do you want to call it? I looked at the envelope, at the catalog, at the city insisting on itself beyond the glass. Visible work, I said. The parts people don't see. Perfect, he said. I'll set it up. On my terms, I echoed. On your terms, he confirmed. And then he let the silence be comfortable, which felt like the rarest courtesy of all. When the call ended, I stood for a long time with my palm flat on the table, feeling the grain of wood under skin, counting the breaths that belonged only to me. I had left early and arrived whole. It didn't fix the past, but it changed the map. Outside, a siren wailed, then receded. A thread pulled and tied. I opened the window. The city answered with ordinary sounds that didn't ask me to be smaller. I poured the rest of the coffee into a clean mug, sat down, and wrote the first lines of the proposal that would be mine in every font that mattered. The city was awake before I was, its pulse already beating through the thin walls of my apartment. I made coffee and opened the curtains wide enough for the noise to feel deliberate. Somewhere in the street below, a delivery truck hissed and reversed. Life, unlike my family, didn't ask for permission to take up space. The museum boardroom smelled of paper and disinfectant. Long glass table, longer shadows. Adrian waited near the end with 2 members of the Education Council, one in tweed, one in efficient silence. I took the seat opposite the window, the one that framed the skyline like a question. We've reviewed your proposal, Tweed said, adjusting his glasses. Visible work is ambitious. That's the point, I said. Adrian leaned forward. Maya's concept isn't just an exhibition. It's a program, student partnerships, public workshops, community curation, a visibility project that builds permanence. Funding? The silent one asked. Private and grant matched, Adrian replied. Her terms are clear. Full curatorial control, transparent accounting, and public attribution on all educational materials. The man in tweed nodded, scribbling notes. You're asking for independence under our umbrella. I'm asking for accuracy, I said. No more ghost credits. No more invisible labor labeled as collaboration. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the silent woman smiled faintly. You'll fit right in. By the time we finished, the city had shifted shades of gray. Approval would take a week, maybe less. I left the building feeling lighter, though not untethered. Independence, I realized, still came with paperwork. Outside, Adrian walked beside me toward the crosswalk. You were surgical in there, he said. Old habits. Precision makes people nervous. He laughed. You've earned the right to make them uncomfortable. I turned to him. Do you ever get tired of being the one who sees too much? Constantly, he said, but I've learned to rest in plain sight. We parted at the corner. I walked the remaining blocks home, the air sharp and bright. In a storefront window, I caught my reflection. Still me, but different posture. No edges blurred. Inside the apartment, I placed the Lane family envelope on the shelf above my desk. Not as evidence anymore, but as artifact. The difference was small but seismic. That evening, my phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. For a second, I braced for the old tone of crisis, but it was Chloe. I saw the interview. The project sounds incredible. Thanks, I typed. It's early. Her reply came faster than I expected. Mom showed me the photo again, the one from the wedding. She said she finally understands why you kept records. I hesitated, then wrote, "Understanding isn't the same as change." "No," she answered, "but it's the start." I didn't reply right away. Instead, I opened my notebook, the same one that had carried my field notes through every exclusion. The last page was almost full. I turned it, found the clean sheet, and wrote, Chapter 13, Terms of Self. Condition 1, Belonging requires truth. Condition 2, Truth doesn't require permission. Condition 3, Records remain, even when people rewrite themselves. The phone buzzed again, Mom this time. Just one sentence. I'd like to see your exhibit. I read it 3 times, uncertain whether it was peace offering or curiosity, but either way, it was hers to extend and mine to accept, or not. I replied, Opening night. You'll get an invite. Outside, the city lights flickered on in sequence, like someone flipping switches across a stage. I closed my eyes and listened. The rhythm wasn't applause, it was continuation, which might have been better. When I looked again at the skyline, it didn't resemble the polished lake from my parents' home. The reflection here was jagged, layered, alive. It didn't flatter. It revealed. I picked up my pen, drew a thin line beneath the last sentence in my notebook, and wrote in smaller letters, Final condition. Leave nothing unresolved that truth can finish. The page glowed faintly under the desk lamp, a document of my own making. I exhaled slowly. The air didn't resist. For the first time, neither did I. The museum's West Gallery smelled of paint and quiet expectation. Scaffolds lined the walls, workers murmured in measured tones, and at the center of it all stood the unfinished skeleton of my exhibition. Visible work. Glass panels leaned against the walls like dormant mirrors waiting to learn reflection. I arrived early, coffee in hand, clipboard under my arm. The installation schedule glared up at me, 15 days until opening night. Every hour accounted for, every object labeled. For once, the list had my name printed clearly at the top. Curated by Maya Lane. Adrian appeared beside a stack of crates. They delivered the final light fixtures, warm hue as you requested. Perfect, I said, walking toward the first display section. A technician was polishing a sheet of mirrored glass that would hang from invisible cables. Etched into its surface were faint words, phrases from the notes I'd written during the wedding week. Be pleasant. Be present. Record the details. Ask for nothing. Don't apologize for seeing clearly. It was strange seeing them out loud, preserved. My private instructions turned into public artifact. Adrian stood beside me. You're sure you want this much of yourself visible? Yes, I said. Visibility is the point, he smiled. Then it's working. I walked through the developing exhibit. One section displayed photographs of hands, artists, janitors, archivists, each labeled with their first names only. Beneath the portraits, plaques detailed what invisible labor made each gallery possible. Lighting technicians, conservators, cleaners, people whose work lived in absence until now. The next section contained sound. Hidden speakers looped recorded statements of acknowledgement, each voice reading the same sentence. This was done by someone whose name you might not remember. The effect was haunting, like ghosts rehearsing gratitude. As the team adjusted placement, I sat on the floor with my notebook, sketching small edits. I crossed out the line, silence as grace, from one caption. That had been my mother's phrase once. Her rationale for shrinking. It didn't belong here anymore. By afternoon, the gallery shimmered under the new lights. The mirrors caught the city through the skylight, fracturing it into shapes that danced across the marble floor. Standing in that glow, I realized how the installation mimicked memory. Fragments rearranged until truth found its own design. Adrian returned with a printout. Press release draft, he said. Would you like to review? I scanned the first lines. Visible work is a multi-medium reflection on the unseen forces that shape creation, identity, and recognition. Curated by artist and archivist Maya Lane, the exhibition transforms personal record into public revelation. "Keep that last phrase," I said. "That's the anchor." He grinned. "Already done." At 5, the technicians left, their footsteps echoing down the corridor. I stayed behind to walk the space once more. In the center stood a small glass case containing the first exhibit piece, a simple manila envelope labeled Lane Family Records. Inside were replicas of the documents I'd once carried like armor: trust papers, programs, a photograph of a girl half out of frame. I'd written a new caption for it. "Every story begins with omission. This is what mine looked like before revision." I sat cross-legged on the polished floor and stared at that envelope for a long time. For the first time, it didn't sting. It contextualized. Just as I began to pack up, I noticed another envelope resting atop a nearby crate, one I hadn't placed there. The handwriting was slanted, deliberate, and unmistakably familiar. My grandmother's. My breath caught as I slid a finger under the flap. The letter inside was short, written decades earlier on yellowed stationery. "You see the world too clearly, Maya. Don't let anyone convince you that's a flaw. Every woman in this family learned to look away. Maybe you're the first who doesn't have to." The paper trembled in my hand. I folded it carefully and placed it inside my notebook beside the exhibition notes. Some inheritances come as apologies, others as permission. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. "We'll be there for the opening. Chloe, too. She's bringing flowers." I typed back, "Good. Bring yourselves instead." No response, but I didn't need one. Presence would suffice. The museum lights dimmed on an automatic timer. In the reflected dark, I could still see the faint outline of my face layered over the exhibit's mirrors. For a second, I imagined my younger self standing beside me, the quiet observer from the family photos, watching as the room filled with proof that she existed, not as witness, but author. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was earned. When I finally left, I turned off the last light and whispered to the empty gallery, "You're visible now." The glass didn't echo. It gleamed. Outside, night pressed gently against the building. I zipped my coat, stepped into the city's steady hum, and felt its reflection carry me forward. By late afternoon, the apartment smelled like roasted rosemary and something sweet I hoped would pass for pie. I'd pulled the table toward the window so the city could sit with us. Steam rising from the street grates, a slice of sky caught between buildings like blue fabric in a frame. I ironed the linen runner twice, even though the creases refused to vanish. Perfection wasn't the point anymore. Presence was. Friends arrived first. Tasha from conservation with flowers in a paper sleeve. Jonah from visitor services carrying a dented casserole he swore was famous. Adrian came balancing a bakery box and a bottle under one arm, his other hand free in case I needed it. "Emergency tart," he said, setting the box down. "Insurance against ambition." "It's beautiful," I said, lifting the lid. "Hairs arranged like a fan." "We'll pretend I made it." He grinned. "Revision is an art." The buzzer sounded again. My chest tightened, then loosened. I pressed the intercom. "Come up!" The elevator was slow the way old machinery is slow, stubborn and dignified. Footsteps approached. A pause, then a knock I recognized from childhood. 3 quick taps, one soft afterthought. Mom stepped in with a careful smile, a bouquet already wilting from the cold. Dad followed, holding a shopping bag that clinked. Chloe and Evan came last, cheeks flushed from wind, hands linked in a way that looked more like partnership than performance. We traded coats for hellos. The room shifted to make space around them, not for them. "You've made it lovely," Mom said, and for once it didn't sound like a test. "Sit," I told them. "No assignments tonight." While the turkey rested, we drifted to the exhibit catalog on the coffee table, visible work stamped across the cover. Dad picked it up, thumbed the edge as if it might cut him. "Your name is everywhere," he said, half wonder, half apology. "It's on the work I did," I answered. He nodded, once. "Good." Chloe stood by the window, studying the skyline reflection trapped in the glass like a second city. "I saw the mirrors," she said. "The etchings." She didn't say the words out loud, but I knew them. Be pleasant, be present. Record the details. Ask for nothing. Don't apologize for seeing clearly. They'd been hers to read, mine to own. "I got a message this morning," she added. "Aunt Lila sent Grandma's letter again, the one she found in her keepsake box. Mom said you already had it from the museum?" I nodded. "She must have sent a copy. I kept the original." Chloe smiled faintly. It sounded like Grandma was talking to all of us, like she knew we'd need reminding. "She did," I said. "She just didn't know when." The timer chimed and broke the moment. We moved like citizens in a kitchen democracy, passing plates, pouring water, arguing gently about salt. I carved with more confidence than skill. The table filled. Mismatched dishes, the salvaged tart, Jonah's famous casserole that turned out to be aggressively average. We ate anyway, grateful like amateurs. Midway through, my phone buzzed with a bank notification. Money had arrived. Lane Family Education Trust, restitution, installment 1. I set the phone face down and let the number find its place without fanfare. When I looked up, Dad was watching me. "It'll come monthly," he said. "With interest." I thought, it should acknowledge the time. "Thank you," I said. The words simple and sufficient. Silences used to frighten us. Now they made room. Conversation floated to ordinary things. Evan told a story about losing his cufflinks 1 hour before the ceremony. Mom admitted the florist had spelled Lane as Lane on the first invoice, and she'd made them redo every tag. We laughed, not because the stories were exceptional, but because we were, for once, listening without deciding where to place the spotlight. After dinner, we migrated to the window with coffee. The city flickered on in pixels. Adrian stood close enough that our shoulders almost touched. "How's it feel?" he asked, eyes on the glass. "Like the room is the right size," I said. "And the map?" "Updated." Chloe flipped through the catalog again and paused on the photo of the glass case, the manila envelope, the caption beneath. "Does it embarrass us?" she asked carefully. "It tells the truth," I said. "Embarrassment is optional." She thought about that, then nodded. "I'm still sorry. Not just for the wedding. For all the times before it." "I know," I said. "Let's practice better."